Hello my 72 subscribers and welcome back to another unit review. Today we'll be looking at Ramiel, the 6th Angel. One of my favorite Ubers in the game, and definitely my favorite Uber from the EVA collab banner. Ramiel is a backliner unit with a standing range of 500 and many abilities, one of them being an absolutely massive LD range that spans from 200 to 1500 range, a level 3 Surge that can spawn from 450 to 1250 range, as well as a 50% dodge chance, massive damage, and 5 to 6 seconds slow against floating. Right off the get-go, you can see that Ramiel isn't really your typical Uber. He's weird, and he has a lot of abilities, but that's not a bad thing, and it's why I think he's one of the most fun Ubers in the game to use. But before I talk about why I love this Uber so much, let's talk about his abilities more. Usually, I wouldn't really talk about the unit's LD parameters in much detail, but with Ramiel, it's kind of important. So, Ramiel has 500 standing range, but with his long distance, as previously stated, he has 200 to 1500 range, giving him 300 inner piercing range and a whopping 1000 outer piercing range. This means Ramiel can outrange almost any enemy in the game with LD, and allows him to envelop almost the whole battlefield in his attack. This gives him great crowd control, as his 34k damage will easily kill most peons that are within his range, as well as higher tier flying enemies due to his massive damage ability and Surge. Speaking of Surge, let's talk about that right now. Ramiel has a level 3 Surge that lasts 3 seconds on the battlefield and can damage enemies up to 3 times that within it. Normally, Ramiel has a kind of sad 1.5k DPS, but with his Surge it quadruples to 6k DPS. Additionally, the Surge further increases his crowd control, as this powerful Surge creates a wall for any enemies who attempt to pass it. And if they have a low KB count, instead of getting knocked back by it, they'll just take the full dosage of damage as they walk through it, amounting to 130k damage for non-floating, and a devastating 544k damage toward floating. But it could be 408k depending on how many treasures you have. All this makes Ramiel sound like the most overpowered LD unit ever, it then dawns on us that his Surge spawn point is extremely inaccurate. So, Ramiel has 500 standing range, right? But the Surge spawns between the ranges 450 and 1250, so it kind of just plops itself down wherever it feels like, whether the enemy you want killed is standing there or not. So usually, it functions more as area denial for peons trying to cross it, rather than a game-breaking DPS boost. Though inaccurate, it will more often than not still be a good help as a peon killing wall, and when it does hit its mark, it can change the tide of a game. Alright, let's talk about his anti-floating abilities now. Dodge, massive damage, and slow. The dodge has good parameters, 50% chance for 2 seconds. The problem is that Ramiel is a pretty terrible dodge unit. He has 1 knockback count, and he's a low health backliner, so when the heck is he gonna dodge anything? And even if he does dodge, he's usually gonna die a little bit after, especially because the dodge only is affecting floating enemies. So it kinda sucks, and I'm gonna move on to the slow ability now. Ramiel slow lasts for 5 to 6 seconds, and it has a very long duration, but Ramiel has 23 seconds between attacks, so that makes the uptime very low, being only 21 to 25%. Considering the fact that it reaches up to 1500 range though, and that the duration itself is so long, I would still say his slow ability is pretty good, but it's more of a bonus crowd control thing rather than like a typical crowd control that just carries you. Alright, lastly, Ramiel's massive damage. This ability, as earlier stated, increases his damage by triple to quadruple depending on how many treasures you have. So he can deal up to 108 to 144k damage, and his DPS increases to 4.5 to 6k DPS. This makes Ramiel's attack function as a giant anti-floating nuke, and any floatings that also get hit with a Surge further get devastated. Good ability, no complaints from me. If you actually look at the stats, you can see Ramiel can do up to 544k damage to floating in 1 attack cycle if you get lucky with a Surge. So, Ramiel has the advantages of a bonkers LD range from 200 to 1500, a powerful level 3 Surge, though inaccurate, you can't deny that it's really strong. He's actually quite inexpensive, long slow duration versus floating, and obviously he completely nukes floating over a big range, and he has an epic attack animation, as you guys have seen up to now. Unfortunately though, Ramiel also suffers some big drawbacks, and many are similar to Ultraland Passaland, the subject of the last unit review. Bad survivability, low base DPS, an inaccurate Surge spawn point, hella long cooldown, and a long time between attacks are all severe burdens that Ramiel is shackled with. All of these factors combined makes Ramiel quite gimmicky, and he obviously doesn't have the best survivability, and he's quite risky to use since you usually only can deploy one of him due to his long cooldown. So if you're planning on using him, you should be certain that he can help you even if his surge misses a couple times. Unlike Ultraland though, Ramiel does have some pros that really stand out. Having a unit with such amazing LD parameters and such fun and diverse abilities like his Surge greatly help him in terms of usage and make him extremely overpowered in some dojo tournaments and collabs, as he completely devastates the floating collab bosses in events like Mercstoria and Hatsune Miku. He is, to be frank, a glass cannon. Very weak defense, but very strong offense if defended because of his great area denial. Also, because you only get one of him due to his long cooldown, you should only really deploy him if you know he can survive, or if the first attack he shoots off will have a profound effect on the battlefield. Before we rank him, I want to mention that in this video, and probably most onward, I'll try to provide at least one or more stages that a unit is useful in during each quote-unquote progression stage of the game, those three stages being early, mid, and late game. So, in early game, Ramiel gets a B+. He's great in Chapter 3 Moon, as well as every Into the Future chapter, as the bosses in all of these stages have floating enemies as bosses. With his godly nuker powers, Ramiel can easily bone each and every one of these floating bosses. Now to mid-game. Ramiel gets downgraded to a B in this stage, as you have more mainstream anti-floating units like Fishman and Sanzo at this point. Ramiel sees little use in most Advent stages, just because most of the Advent bosses outrange Ramiel, and using him as an LD sniper is either infeasible or has too little payoff. He is, however, good in any of the floating shrine stages and SOL stages like Perfume Room and Sniper Jungle, which either spam little peons or include many floating enemies. As previously stated, Ramiel also completely breaks a lot of dojo levels, as the surge is really overpowered in them, and usually it actually hurts the dojo base, I'm pretty sure, as well as any enemies that spawn on it. In late game, Ramiel remains in D tier. Though rarely used in Uncanny Legends, he does outrange the Relic Moth, so is a reliable counter to him as long as you take care of any support the Moth packs with him. Ramiel is also useful in a handful of Heavenly Tower stages, a good example being Floor 41, where enemy A Bahamut and Holy Valkyrie return. In terms of a specialist score, I had to give Ramiel an A because of his anti-floating prowess against enemies of all ranges, and he's pretty unrivaled in that category due to his wide LD range and slow ability. Of course, his surge and long LD span give him a niche as a crowd controller, basically destroying all existing and incoming peons within his 1500 range due to his solid 34k base damage. I know I might seem a little biased towards Ramiel, and honestly that's because I am. He's a super fun unit, super awesome, and I think he looks super cool. So yeah, he does have some big downsides, but you can't really hate on the guy when he's just so fun to use. It's very satisfying to just watch his attack destroy every little peon that touches his range. Overall, a great, refreshing, and quite unique Uber to have, and I think Ponce did a pretty good job with this guy. Because of his bad survivability and recharge rate, he's nowhere near overpowered, but he does really excel in his niches and is quite enjoyable to use. So, that's all I got to say about Ramiel. Just a super fun Uber, and while he's not an all-powerful super generalist, he is very refreshing, and I honestly can't think of any other Uber like him. 10 out of 10 on the fun meter, at least. As of writing the script, it's turned out very long, especially compared to my other videos, so I hope you guys didn't get bored through it and click off, but if you watch this far, you obviously watched the whole thing, and thanks. If you liked the video, please subscribe, leave a comment, a like, and tell me what unit you want next. It doesn't have to be an Uber. I'm publishing this so close to my last unit review because I'm going on vacation again this week, so I really won't be posting much over the next 4 to 5 days. And thank you very much for 69 subscribers. I really appreciate it. This is a huge milestone for me. And I look forward to seeing the channel grow even more. So next sub milestone is 100, I guess. If you've watched this far, you're a trooper. Thanks for watching to the end as usual. Kind of longish video, I think, at this point. See you next time. Bye-bye.